Welcome to ScholarsByte, a talk show with researchers. I'm your host, Amrita Panjwani, founder of Simplified Statistics. And today on this talk show, we have an eminent researcher who pursued his PhD in mathematics from the University of Chicago. His key areas of specialization are representation theory, number theory, harmonic analysis, and group theory. Just to give you a glimpse about his dynamic personality, he received the Young Scientist Medal in the year 2010 from the Indian National Science Academy. A warm welcome to Dr. Amritanshu Prasad.
Thank you, Amrita. It's a great pleasure to be here.
It's an honor, sir. And let's start with a brief introduction about yourself.
Sure. So I grew up in Bangalore. My father was a mathematician at the Indian Institute of Science. So he still stays there in Bangalore. And I grew up around the campus of Indian Institute of Science. My father gave me nice maths books to read. And sure enough, I liked mathematics a lot because of this kind of exposure. And after finishing school, I went to the Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata, where I got a degree in statistics. I was always interested in maths. And at that time, I think ISI Kolkata ran one of the best undergraduate programs in maths, even though it was a statistics program per se. And that was a very intense and lovely experience. After that, I went to the University of Chicago, where I went to do my master's and then PhD. Spent about 6 years there working on my PhD. And then 2 years in Montreal as a postdoctoral fellow. And then I came back to India and joined the Institute of Mathematical Sciences, where I've been ever since.
Okay. So, how has your research been? How was your experience during the research?
So, it's been something that's constantly evolving. So these days, I work in an area called algebraic combinatorics. So this is an area which connects counting problems, which or rather applies to counting problems, ideas from algebra. So let me try to give you an example. A very old problem of this flavor is the so-called de Montmort problem. Now imagine that there's a teacher who has a large class, maybe of 100 students, and the teacher wants the students all write an assignment, and now the teacher wants the students to grade each other's assignment. So what the teacher does is, she just hands back the assignments randomly to the students. Now, you don't want a student to be grading their own assignment, right?
Right.
So let's ask, what's the probability that no student gets back their own assignment? So would you think that it's very large, or do you think it's very small? Like if say there are 100 students in the class, right? And you're one of those students, the chance that you would get back your assignment seems very remote, right? That out of 100, it would be 1 in 100, so to speak. But then still there are 100 students. So maybe, each of those students. So how do you exactly calculate this? It turns out that this is a problem which involves understanding what are called permutations. So you have 100 students. The returned assignments are somehow a rearrangement of those 100 students in a different way. So you have a function from the set of students to the set of students, which assigns to each student the assignment that they get back. And we are sort of asking, what is the probability that nobody gets back their own assignment? So this is a problem which involves counting and at the same time involves understanding a certain algebraic structure, which is this permutation. So this is an old problem, maybe 300 years old, but it just, the answer, okay, you must be wondering what the answer is. It turns out that the probability that no student gets back their own assignment is roughly 1 in 3. It's actually 1 over E, Euler's number, the natural base for logarithms.
Okay.
And it's, yeah, surprising, right?
Right.
You can go much deeper into this kind of story and ask
True.
about various things that can happen under these things. So this would be what one would call the study of random permutations. So it brings together ideas from probability theory, counting, and algebra.
Okay, that sounds really interesting to me, to be very honest.
Yeah, well, it keeps me busy.
Yes, I totally agree with you because I've been into the field of numbers and I can understand when you get such research topics, it's really very interesting to get involved in it completely.
Yeah.
Okay, so were there any challenges that you faced during your research?
Well, I would say I've been quite lucky in the sense that, my career has been fairly smooth sailing. I was blessed with many advantages right from the beginning. And I've been
Mhm.
lucky in that I've had very, very supportive and nice uh, teachers and colleagues and peers throughout my career. But I think career in academia is always fraught with many difficulties. One of the biggest difficulties I feel is balancing your personal life and your research. To be a good mathematician, or maybe probably in any area to be really good, you need to dedicate everything to your work. And it's very difficult then. You cannot actually uh, pay enough attention to your personal life. Already, when you do a PhD and so on, you could well be close to 30 years old by the time you settle down. This
Right.
is 5 or 6 years of PhD, and then nowadays it's like really interminable postdocs before you can get a permanent position. And all this time, you're not earning very much for somebody with uh, the amount of work you put into it. So I think
Mm.
that's something very difficult, and I don't really see any solution. I mean, people talk about work-life balance, but it's not something that's really easy to achieve. It's
True.
something you have to compromise somewhere.
Right.
And yeah, so that's one difficulty that I think not just me but all of us face.
I
um,
agree.
how much are you willing to give? Yeah.
Right.
The other
That's
thing I think in maths, or in probably in all research, the so you work for, like, we work on very hard problems. The time taken, at least for me, many of the problems, sometimes you work for 2 3 years on a problem, and after all this work you write up a paper, and you think this is, this is oh, this is so beautiful, I've put my all into it. And then you submit it to an excellent journal, and then you get this referee report which says, oh, this is like, not particularly great. I'm not very happy
okay.
with this. The author has failed to do that. And sometimes it's justified, and sometimes it's just your bad luck. And I think sometimes, of course, the opposite happens. You also feel that your work has been overrated. But then dealing with these kinds of things where constantly, so for us, there's no output, right? If you're a businessman, you have your bottom line. Okay, I made so much money today. But for us, the output is so intangible. It's the judgment of our peers. And this can be very harsh at times. So I think dealing with this is another challenge that we face in academia. And I think it's important that people face these with sort of maturity and have some sense of their own, not to go too strongly by the judgment of others, but to work by your own standards.
That's a new perspective I've got to know today. It's not easy to come up with research papers. Once you come up with that, being approved is another challenge, I would say.
Yes.
Okay.
At least, by personal experience, I've had this.
Yes, I can sense that because until and unless you experience something, you cannot know about it. And otherwise, for me, for a person who is not in research background, I would say the grass always looks greener on the other side. So I would say, oh, they have so many research papers. It sounds so wonderful, but the pain and the work and the effort behind that is not visible to us. So thank you for bringing that to light today.
Yeah, it's something we learn to deal with, though. I think it's not,
Right.
at the end of it, you shouldn't let that control your life.
Right. That's so true. So, what have been your achievements throughout the research process or post completion of your PhD? What were your achievements? How would you define them?
So I think if you think of achievements, then I would like to say the things that give you the greatest satisfaction when you look back and at your work. And for me, I think the achievements have really been certain moments of when I have understood something really well. So there are times when you work, like you think about a problem, it's like in your head day and night, and then suddenly this moment of clarity. I still remember some of these words. I remember sitting with my collaborator in my office and suddenly drawing this picture, and everything becomes so clear. And
Wow.
that happiness that you get when you
Right.
suddenly understand something cannot be compared to anything
Anything
else.
else.
Like, getting a PhD, getting this prize, that prize, that's great too, but it just simply does not compare with the pleasure of trying to do mathematics and understanding things. That's one thing. The other thing in terms of achievements, I think the thing that's given me greatest pleasure is my students. It's tricky business to become a mathematician. Our college system teaches us to learn things from books, solve problems from
Mhm.
books. And at some point, when you become a mathematician, you need to break out of that. You need to be able to think on your own terms. You need to be able to, uh, not feel constrained by the way people have taught you to think. You have to be able to come up with new ideas. And with PhD students, initially they come out of that background, and it's just a great pleasure to see how they transform into mathematicians over a period of a few years. And after some time, they are your colleagues. It's just wonderful.
Wow, that's a totally amazing experience. It sounds great. What would be your message to the aspiring scholars?
Um, so I think these days there's a lot of pressure on young scientists to publish a lot, to write lots of papers. We are constantly being asked to, write down our citation index and impact factors. And when we apply for jobs, unfortunately, people count our publications and so on. And what happens in the process is that in trying to write a lot of papers and so on, we are unable to do the work that we really want to do, the serious, deep work that we signed up not for writing papers. We Most of us are doing maths. I would say not even because it's useful, but because we are really curious about the subject. We want to
Right.
understand things. We want to discover things. And I would like to say that one shouldn't lose sight of that in managing one's career. You must always keep that alive. Try to remember why it is that you became a mathematician or a scientist, and keep that passion alive. Yeah,
That's a good point. I would say the spark of being a researcher shouldn't go off just because the career needs are different. The spark must be there because that is what keeps you alive as a researcher.
exactly. Yes.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Dr. Prasad, today, and I really feel honored that you have taken out time to be a part of our talk show.
No, thank you, Amrita, for setting up this talk. It's, of course, a great pleasure. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. And thank you for taking this effort to talk to scientists and try to understand better what motivates them and so on. It's a great project that you're doing. Wish you all the best.